Hey guys, this is Justin at The Survivor Review, and with Mad Max Fury Road coming out in a couple of days, I'm going to talk about the original Mad Max Trilogy. Now before I begin, I'm going to say that Sam and I have been really busy lately, which is why we haven't done our Avengers Age of Ultron spoiler video that we were going to do, and why this is one video instead of three. My original plan was to review all three movies separately, but just haven't had the time to do that, so I'm going to do it in this one video. So, let's begin with the original 1979 classic, Mad Max. Now, the first movie in the series is a bit different than what you'd expect. What's the first thing you say when you're describing Mad Max to somebody? You say, hey, it's post-apocalyptic, right? Well, this movie is not post-apocalyptic. It's actually different than that. It takes place in a dystopian future where there's still a civilization, but it's slowly crumbling. Like, the police station is really crappy state and stuff like that, but there's still a civilization. So that's definitely a different pace than the rest of the franchise. The movie centers around Max, played by Mel Gibson, and the other cops that work with him, and there's this biker gang that comes into town just tearing stuff up, causing a bunch of trouble, and they take some things a little too far with Max's friend and his family. We'll leave it at that for spoilers' sake. And Max goes and gets revenge on them. So that's a basic gist of the plot. The plot's actually really simple, and that's how most of the Mad Max movies are. They're just really simple plot, just there to get you started on the action and stuff like that. So the first Mad Max movie, it's not a perfect movie. There are some issues with it. The pacing can be off sometimes. There's a couple of slow moments. There's a part later on in the movie where Max and his family, he retires and they go out to like the countryside and spend time together, and that was a little slow. But aside from that, the movie's pretty well paced. And you know, the whole idea of the movie that Max is broken by this gang and he goes and gets revenge on them, hence why the title is Mad Max. The problem is that doesn't come into play till the last act of the movie. That's the climax of the movie, is when he becomes Mad Max. And the rest of the movie, he's just a calm, regular guy. Even when stuff gets too crazy, he just quits.
Cheers. I'm through.
My guy?
No, not again. I'm through. I'm quitting.
That's his solution to that. So it's kind of interesting how it kind of plays with your expectations, but not really in a good way. But it kind of plays with that where it's like you're expecting the whole tragedy to happen in the beginning of the movie, and the whole rest of the movie is him getting revenge. And it's really not that. And that can be a little annoying to some people. And once you know about that, the movie gets better on rewatch. But when you're first watching it, you're like, this feels a little weird, because it's not what you'd expect. So the action scenes in this movie, they're not as elaborate as the series goes on, as the series gets. And that's because this movie is really low budget. And the action scenes are still great, because you know it's all real. You know all the stunts are happening with like little safety as possible, because they just did whatever they could. They didn't have like a lot of safety rigs or anything to really do these stunts safely. In fact, I think I heard some people even got injured like while doing these stunts, and that's what makes them so great. They're really cool stunts. They're not, like I said, they're not huge, but they're awesome stunts. And the action scenes in the opening and ending of the movie are fantastic. There's an opening chase scene at the beginning, and that scene is just awesome. And there's the whole scene, the whole ending of this movie, once Max goes to get revenge on the whole gang, biker gang, that last act of the movie never stops. It's so fast-paced and intense, and it's just him going after the guys. It's great. The ending is perfect. I loved it. The villain of the movie, the toe cutter, is not really intimidating, but he's just really cool, and he's a really fun villain, and I love him. For this movie, you just gotta know what to expect going in. Gotta know that it's a bit slower paced. It's not crazy. It's not non-stop action. It's a bit slower paced. Some of the acting is not so great, and the movie's really low budget. But if you know what to expect going in, you should enjoy it and have a great time with it. At least that's what I feel. So out of 10, I'm going to give it a solid 9 for being just a classic movie. That I really like it. I love the style of it. I love the 70s feel of it. I love that it, to a lesser extent, you can see some of that George Miller, the director, style of just doing whatever he wants. Like sometimes when some of the villains die, there's a close up of their eyes just literally bugging out in like a cartoon fashion, and it's just so awesome. You can tell it's just them just doing whatever they want, and it's great. So it's a really fun, awesome movie. Again, know what to expect going in though. So 2 years later, George Miller got some money and made a follow-up called Mad Max 2, The Road Warrior. This is where things really kick off. This movie is an action masterpiece, in my opinion. It's such a great film. It's one of those movies that it's every Mad Max movie is pretty much like this, where the plot doesn't really matter, because the plot of the Road Warrior is very simple. Essentially, it's post-apocalyptic. It takes place, I don't know how many years after the first Mad Max, but they have a whole prologue discussing what happened and stuff like that. So it is post-apocalyptic, and Max is just on the road, just looking for gasoline. And he comes across this group that live in a gas rig area, and they're just being taunted by this gang of bad guys. And he helps them escape from that rig with their gasoline in exchange for some gasoline for himself. That's about it. The plot's really simple, but that's not what makes the movie great. What makes the movie great is the action scenes, which they take all the crazy stunts from the first movie and just amp it up. They take it one step further, and it's crazy. The stunts are insane. The whole last act of this movie is intense, and most of the movie is actually intense because there's a bunch of action scenes spread throughout. And all the acting is really good. The characters are interesting. They're not the most amazing characters, but I like the gyro captain. He's a really funny guy. I like the villain, Lord Humongous, who's just ridiculous but awesome. And his henchman, the other bad guy. Just an entertaining cast of characters. Mel Gibson's portrayal of Mad Max, the way he acts in this film is like the standard for the character of Max. Kind of like how the way Bruce Campbell acts in Army of Darkness is the way Asher's known, more compared to the first two films where he's more subdued. The Road Warrior is the way Max is known. In this movie, he's silent. He doesn't even talk until 15 minutes into the movie, and he only has about 16 or so lines for the whole film.
Who are you? How did you get through out there?
He's a silent type. He only talks when he has to. And I love that. His character is great. I love the Max character. In the first film, he was more average, and then it was interesting to see him just pushed to the level he was by the end of the film, and then to see where he's gone since then in this movie, how much he's changed to a more just broken down person, is really interesting and really well done. Again, Mel Gibson is just perfect as a role. He's great. So, The Road Warrior. There's not a whole lot to say except if you love action movies, you've got to see this. If you haven't seen this yet, what are you doing? It's a great film. The action scenes are intense. The story, as simple as it is interesting enough to keep you moving along. Great set pieces, just an awesome action classic. So out of 10, I have to give it a 10, just for being such a great film. So the series so far is really awesome, as you can tell by my ratings for Mad Max and The Road Warrior. Well, then we get to Mad Max Beyond Thunderdome. I'm not a big fan of this movie. No way. I mean, I don't hate it, but this one is the weakest out of the whole entire series, and there's a reason why I've only seen it twice, and I don't plan to watch it again. The plot of the film basically takes place however many years after the Road Warrior, and you see Max just wandering around the desert, and that leads him to this town called Bartertown, which is basically just a mini civilization that kind of put together, and it's run by Tina Turner, which is weird, but whatever. And basically he's working there, and after a series of events, an awesome fight scene in the Thunderdome, he gets kicked out of Bartertown. And that first half of the movie right there, that's the first 45 minutes until he gets kicked out of Bartertown. It's awesome. I actually really like that. It's this wild, it has that George Miller creativity where it's a lot of weird characters. There's the character Master Blaster, who's basically just a midget on top of a giant muscular dude. It's two guys, there's Master and Blaster. It's ridiculous, but I love it. Even Tina Turner is fine in the part. She's not great or anything, but she could have been worse. And it's just, I like the world he created. The way he expands the universe, how he brought it further, because the whole Bartertown idea, it's the next logical step after the Road Warrior, because Road Warrior is really desolate and empty. The next step after that would be rebuilding civilization. So I like that, and that's a really cool way to kind of move the series forward. And it was fun. The battle scene in Thunderdome is awesome. That's the highlight of the movie right there. It's a really fun fight scene. It has them bouncing around the Thunderdome. Awesome. Really entertaining first half. I loved it. So, you're wondering what happens to make it go downhill. Well, after he gets banished from Bartertown, he gets picked up by a group of kids who believe him to be this pilot, this captain, Captain Walker, who is going to take him to this Tomorrow land, and has a lot of ties into like old civilization and what happened before that. And that's when the movie just starts to sink, because it gets really caught up in its story. This movie doesn't feel like Mad Max, and the movie is PG-13. It's the only PG-13 one of the series, and that's not really the flaw with it. The flaw with it is it doesn't feel like Mad Max. It doesn't feel like the same type of movie as a Mad Max movie. Whereas like Live Free or Die Hard didn't feel like a Die Hard movie. It still felt like an action movie. It was a generic PG-13 action movie. It's like a children's film at times. It gets really heavy-handed, like with the story and mythology, with the kids explaining the plane crash and all that stuff. And that's where I lost interest. And not only that, a lot of the grit from the first two films is gone. And this movie feels very Hollywood, because it was actually a big Hollywood production. Obviously, you can tell that by Tina Turner being in it. But like that grit is gone. And when he gets picked up by the kids, the movie just slows down. And it's just him dealing with this tribe of kids, and they're wandering across the desert and stuff. And it's so uninteresting. And feels totally left field. It feels totally out of place in this movie. And then the climax of the movie, when they get back to Bartertown, and they partake in the typical Mad Max car chase, it felt like they were doing that. It felt like it was doing that out of obligation. Like, it was a Mad Max movie. You have to have a car chase at the end. And the chase at the end has some entertaining moments, but it doesn't have the same impact as like the chase at the end of Road Warrior. And there's a lot of moments in it that are played for laughs. And they're just like, no. And the movie just kind of sings. The movie, I feel like after he leaves Bartertown, never fully recovers. It has moments spread throughout that work, but I just can't really get into it. We like that first half of Bartertown. That part's awesome. So yeah, that's Mad Max Beyond Thunderdome. Just disappointment, and just not what it should have been. Out of 10, it's kind of hard, because I really like that first half. The first half was awesome. I'm gonna go 6 out of 10. Just to be generous, because I still like Mad Max. I still love George Miller's style. I still love Mel Gibson as the role. It's just that last half, man, it just doesn't do it for me at all. So that's my quick look at the Mad Max trilogy. I wish I could have gone on for longer and focused on each movie more, but I just don't have the time to do this right now, so I just thought this would be good just to talk about all 3 films. Really interesting trilogy of films. If you haven't seen them, check them out, especially the first 2 and the first act of 3. So yeah, that's about it for now, and the next video I'll be doing will probably be my review of Mad Max Fury Road. So until then, I'll see you guys later.